privacy. It does not support web forms. So this is one, I would say, disadvantage. Like there are a lot of enterprise applications which still uses web forms. Uh, your web forms and also Windows applications. So that is not available in your .NET Core. Next is it was Visual Studio and it was using C Sharp, VB, F Sharp. Same things you can use, but now we have Visual Studio for Mac also, and there is something Visual Studio Code. So you can go and through this. There are different IDs of the Visual Studio family. The performance is much better in .NET Core. It is an open source and cross-platform network. That is, of course, now I can go on any other network and work on it. One uh, if you I will give you an example of what this cross-platform means. Remember, we have mobile phone apps, and an app comes different for iOS, and an app is different for Android. But nowadays, people make hybrid apps, an app which can be installed on Mac also and which can be installed on Windows also. Same way, this is .NET Core. This can be installed on any platform. It is not specific only for Microsoft Windows. It is much modern and cloud-based application. .NET Framework was mainly for enterprise-based application. Uh, and .NET Core also supports .NET Framework. So one thing is that it will support both framework and core. Now let's talk about what are the characteristics of .NET Core. So first, as I already discussed, it's open source, it's cross platforms, it is consistent across architectures. We can have a wide range of applications. It supports multiple languages. I can do through C Sharp, I can do through F Sharp. Then it has a much better and modular architecture. We can use the CLI tools, earlier tools there, which are there. It still supports them. The very important part is flexible deployments. Now, .NET Core application can be deployed user-wide or system-wide or with Docker containers. Are you guys aware of the Dockers? Anyone? Docker is nothing but a container. Basically, you remember we had used to everything first is to be is deployed on physical servers. Then came virtual machines. Virtual machine was what? Virtualizing the hardware. Everything is now you can say uh, same system, same thing. Your physical machine is one, but you have virtual machine over this. Same keyboard, things are different. Containers is now virtualizing the operating system. That so that they use the better resources. So even on .NET Core can be deployed on the Dockers. We can go more about Dockers later on. And then it is compatible with .NET Framework also and Mono APIs using .NET standard specification. So it supports the backward compatibility as well. Talking about versions, like right now, Alika was saying that earlier we were working on .NET Framework 3, then came 4. .NET Framework 5 is coming very soon. In fact, this is the old one I told you the release date. Just few days back, they released the preview 8 of .NET Framework 5, which is the last preview. And most probably in November, .NET Framework 5 will be released. But when we talk about core specifically, there are two, the .NET Core 2 and .NET Core 3 currently in the market. 2 was released in the stable version of 2 is 2.1.17 and 3 is 3.1.3. Both are going to be supported for quite a time now. But the thing to make sure is .NET Core 2 runs on .NET Core as well as .NET Framework. But the newer version, that is the 3, only run on .NET Core Framework. So this is the major difference between .NET Core 2 and .NET Core 3. We will be focusing on .NET Core 3 throughout this tutorial. Guys, if anyone has any question, please feel free to jump in and ask. Oh, sure, sure, sure.
Hey, you can just
Sorry,
turn off your video and then.
connected. I got disconnected by somehow. I'm back. Yes, please. Okay, great. Let
Sorry, I want to ask, like my company, right? Some before this, we are doing .NET uh, .NET framework. Then after that, they suggest us to change to .NET Core. Actually, when when start a project, do we have any what the reason we choose .NET framework of .NET Core? Is it consider the
uh,
project size or how is it?
yes, uh, there are scenarios where .NET Framework would still be a good option. Like I told, .NET Framework is much better for enterprise-wise application. Like there is a project I'm currently working on. It's a huge project. Like internally, it has 400 mini projects inside it, and it's based on .NET Framework. To move completely to the whole project to .NET Core would be very difficult and it won't be compatible. It is based on web forms. It is based on the window application, WinForms. So these are not supported by Core anymore. If I have an MVC application and I want to move it to Core, it's quite easy. But if I have a web form application, ASP.NET Web Forms, and I want to move it to .NET Core, I cannot because it is not supported in the .NET Core. So it does depend upon the size of the project you're already in. Maybe yes, if you're going to start a new project, it will be much better to start in .NET Core. But then again, we also make sure if your requirement, your client wants, or let's say your requirement is only related to that they want to use it on their local system. It's for one company only. I'm developing a human resource management system for a company, and they have only Windows systems in their office. They do not have Apple and or they do not have Linux. So we might go with .NET Framework only. It's okay. But they have miscellaneous. They have support. They have both operating systems, and they want it to run on both. Then I might go with .NET Core. So it does depend upon the type of application we want to make. What is the audience? What kind of variety of operating systems or systems they are using, how cross compatible. The whole major, when I talked about .NET Core characteristics, one of the major, which is the reason this came into the face, cross platform. .NET Framework was only for Windows and .NET Core is for everyone. So this is the major, I would say, out of all the characteristics, this is the major one which makes it different from framework. And again, when it comes to choosing this or that, this is your decision area, is what I think.
Okay.
Hope
Uh,
that answers your question.
Yeah, I think I
uh,
understand. Okay. Thank you.
Frank, I have a question.
Yes, Dhananjay.
So basically, like in the previous slide, I see that we have MVC in .NET
You're
Framework
talking
as
about
well.
this.
Yeah, this one. So basically, like
Yes,
we have MVC in .NET Core and .NET Framework both. Right?
yes.
Okay. So means what is the basic difference, like when we are building an application in .NET Framework MVC and when we are building application in .NET Core MVC? Then what are the basic differences? And
As I talked about again, if you see the other points, if I'm using the .NET Framework MVC in this and that same thing, but again depends upon what. If I want an MVC application only specific for this Windows, I'm good with framework. But I want the same to run on Mac also. I want to run the same on Linux servers also. I'll go with .NET Core. Also, .NET Core is much better in the form of deployment. I can deploy it over cloud. I can deploy it on Dockers. It is much more fast. The performance is better. So of course, newer thing it has been made better. So .NET Core is good in that case. .NET Framework, in fact, they are introducing .NET 5 now. For .NET 5, I read that there will be MVC and entity framework, everything new. So whatever they, in fact, they have not introduced entity framework after 6. They have introduced entity framework core. They are introducing MVC core. So what Microsoft is intending to do is slowly they are turning all the new features as the part of the core family, which is transitioning it into something better, because of course everything nowadays is cross platform. No one wants something which is only for one platform. But yes, if something which is very old, which is something existing, you have a legacy application, then it is of course dependent upon the company that how easy it is for them to move it, to port it, the whole application to the new core part of it. Hope that answers it.
Yeah, it answers. So basically, like you're talking about Docker. So my first question is, so does .NET Framework doesn't support Docker and only .NET Core supports?
Yeah, .NET. I think right now, if I want to directly, can't run it on .NET Framework directly on the application on Docker, because first I need to install .NET Framework there. The basic functionality of .NET Core is it does not have any, it's self-sufficient. The whole application comes itself into one package. So if I create an application, HRMS, and I gave it to you to run it through Docker or any directly, you will be able to run it before installing anything previous. But if I give you an application created on .NET Framework, it will explicitly first you need to install .NET Framework onto your system, onto your server, and then you will be able to access the application. My application itself won't install .NET Framework. So that is the difference. .NET Core comes as a package, which you don't have to do anything else into it.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, so moving on to .NET Core composition now. This is a very basic that it is composed of 4 parts, that is CLI tools, Roslyn, Core FX, and Core CLR. Let's talk about each one of them very briefly. What is CLI is nothing but a tool for development and deployment, that is you all know class libraries. Roslyn is the language compiler for C# and Visual Basic. So the compiler, we all know the compilers for .NET Core, it is Roslyn. Core FX is the framework library, and Core CLR is just a command language runtime, which is for Core. So normal CLR, we all read about .NET Framework when we have read its CLR. With Core, it's just Core CLR. Let's jump into ASP.NET. And before actually getting into ASP.NET Core, I want to again briefly go into what is ASP.NET versus ASP.NET Core. It's majorly the same thing, that it's going to support, Core is going to support Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. It only supports Windows. ASP.NET Core supports both, again, .NET Core and .NET Framework, but ASP.NET just support .NET Framework. We know Razor Pages is recommended to create, but here we can use web forms, single IR, MVC, web API. So these are all different formats. The most common ones being web forms and MVC. But in Core, we ask people to use MVC and Razor Pages more. There is no web forms here. It has a much higher performance than ASP.NET, multiple versions in a machine. What does it mean by multiple versions in a machine is I can install, I can create like a version 1 of application, version 2 of application, and I can host on my IaaS and it will support that. Again, I can use different IDs for it. I told you there are Visual Studio Family IDs in this. This is very important part. ASP.NET were only hosted on IaaS, that is in, but here we not only IaaS, you can also be it on self-hosted using another web servers or Linux servers. So it gives us much more. So if your company does not want to go and purchase a Windows server, they already have a Linux server, and or you have an AWS server, and now you want to host your .NET application in that only. It's going to be very easy for us. In fact, this used to be one challenge when I have seen in companies when they decide upon technology, which technology to go with this project. One thing comes very generally is sometimes people, Windows as servers are costly, very costly. And if they already have 5 applications working on Linux server, they does not generally want to buy a complete just a new server only for a new application. So they prefer let's go with PHP, let's go with and host it on Linux only. But here with .NET Core, now you have the I would say the freedom of making a .NET application and hosting it onto your Linux server. Now, this is something which we'll be learning more in detail going forward. www root folder. In ASP.NET, we do not have any such folder, but here to store the static files, we have this folder. And it does support inbuilt dependency injections, but which was not there in the ASP.NET. ASP.NET 3 runs on .NET Core. Again, same thing which we read here, .NET Core and .NET Core 3. That is, 3 uses only .NET Core, whereas 2 supports .NET Core and .NET Framework both. So same thing is going for this also. Now that's all the theoretical part, ASP.NET thing. Let's move on to building our first application. Let me just start my Visual Studio. Can you guys see Visual Studio 2019?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, before that installation part, I hope everyone is okay with the installation part. You all can go on the uh, search for .NET Visual Studio 2019 and install .NET Core. So I'm not going through the installation part, as I think that is when we all are working on Visual Studio. So 3.1 as an application. So this is my new project screen. Let's go and create a new project. Give it a minute. So I want to create the web application. So if here you see, I don't need to search, it's there, ASP.NET Core web application. You can see here it's supporting C#, Linux, Mac OS, Windows, Cloud, and so many more. So I'll just choose this and next. Let's just rename it to and create. See here, you can see this is selected .NET Core, and here it is the version of it, ASP.NET Core 2.1 or 3.1. We are going to go with 3.1, the latest one. Here it is giving you a number of options, that is a template you can choose. We are going to create a web application, so let's go to select the web application one. Here, if you see in the advanced version, it is there that we want to enable Docker support. Do you want to configure it for HTTPS? Right now, I don't want to even configure for HTTPS, so I'm not selecting it, and I'm just going to create.
Priyanka, are you still on this configure project screen?
Yes, you can see it's creating project. It does take a minute to create a project because it is restoring the packages. When I say restoring the packages, means it is automatically adding all the configured dependencies as nugget packages in the project. So for this, when I say create a new project, whatever dependencies it needs for the core adding things, it's going to add themselves
So basically,
as
like,
nugget packages.
okay.
Then not just because I'm just coming on the structure, so maybe you will get to know about it more. If you see, you guys are able to view my screen, right? See, the project has been.
Yeah, it is not being shared at the moment.
Okay. Let me check. It's not being shared. Okay. Sorry for that. I think it's visible now, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, great. Okay. So this is the application. Let me go full screen.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt, but I was doing along with you. So here's some options like API web application model view controller. Which one should I choose? I didn't catch. Can you repeat that?
We for now have chosen the web application, Samantha, and I think SiteWire is also asking the same thing because right now we are not directly jumping into the MVC. So we are just creating our first basic web application with the Razor and all. So we chose the web application template.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So this is my architecture. If you see, I already have my solution created. The structure is there, and there is this whole little IS Express thing to run my application. Let's just once run this and see what comes for us. So this is, if you can see, the build has started in the output window. If you can see, it will start the configuration and start this. I think I'm just sharing one particular screen, so you might not be able to see when it opens IS. Let me share my complete. Give me a minute. I'm sorry for all the trouble on all this. Yes. So now if you can see, it has started loading my local host. Local host is just that it's running, the server is on my local system, my local IS. The IS installed in my system is running and the application is running over here. It has given a dummy port number to it, temporary port 64176.
I have another number. Does it vary in different machines?
Yeah, it will vary for everyone. It won't be same for because it's just a local temporary number given. And you see the first welcome page, whatever was by default created for us in index, it is there. So my application is running fine.
Okay.
I'll just close it and come back to the Visual Studios. So are you guys following? You can either follow with me step by step, or you can look at it right now and maybe follow at your own pace, what as you wish. So the way it suits you. Our next way is going to be about the project structure, the solution explorer. When we add, this is my solution, the XLN file, and this is my project. So I created the application as my first core app. So this application has started here. If you see, there is a whole dependency thing, framework and analyzers. So it automatically added the dependency I needed for the application as here. If you click here on this button, switch views, it will show you all the folder structures which is there in the here. You right now don't see bin and everything, right? See, now if I change the structure, you can see the bin, the pages, properties, and all the other for CS project file and everything which is there. It keeps your files in everything right. A very small little thing, let me tell you, when ASP.NET Core 1.0 started, there was no CS project. They came up with uh, .xproj or project.json was there, they did not have the CS for that is C sharp project. CS stands for C sharp project. It was not there, but when they came up with 2.0 version, they again came back with CS project. And right now, also, if you see in framework, also you have CS proj, but in core 1.0, CS proj was missing. If I go and say edit my CS proj file, this is the file. You can see this is how your CS files looks like. It tells you what is your .NET target framework. So you hear the target framework. You can see we selected the framework as .NET Core App 3.1. So here you can see the framework. If you might need some adding uh, some more dependencies or more packages and etc. You want to set up your folder structure and everything. You can add more details into the CS. So as we will be going and adding to this project and adding more details to it, you will see this. There will be details added to this particular CS project file automatically. It includes all the settings related to the target framework, the project folders, nugget package references, etc. Everything. Now let's talk about the dependency. The dependencies folder. The dependency projects are all already inside and are installed on the server side nugget packages. So if I go and I open this analyzers and this framework, so you can see here that there is .NET Core analyzers and this. These are all installed directly. .NET Core app is installed, framework is installed. Any question? Are you guys following till here? Next moves to properties, and here you can see there is launch settings.json. Let me open the file for you. Here you see this is a JSON file that is the script. Here you can see the IIS settings are there, that whether it is going to take Windows authentication, there will be anonymous authentication. So you can set authentication settings from here. What will be the launch browser? Will it be launched on the browser? What will be the application URL? It will be localhost. See, this is the environment variable. It has there this ASP.NET Core environment. It added an environment variables and is it set to development. So you can see the settings here. You can also, in fact, edit it here. You can edit the settings. So if I go to this debug tab, just give me a minute. Yeah. I open the properties of this application, and here you can see I can, if I want to change the target framework, I can go and change the target framework also from here. If I want to move it back again to 2.1 or 2.2 or something, I can move back and change the target framework here. Uh, Here there are different, that what will be the build application. I want to give an icon to my application. I can go and add an icon from here. So here you can go and do more settings. There is this debug thing. Here you have the IIS Express. If I want to change my debug thing and everything, that I want to change this, we can also change here. I want to set an environment variable. This has already added with one more. If I want to go and edit another, let's say I want to add one environment variable for QA environment, I can go and add another variable here. So this is this property here. If I deselect the launch browser, it will change the value of launch browser from here to false. So either you can go and do the settings directly in the JSON file, or you can also choose the property tab window and do the settings from there. Okay, let's move forward. You also see this www root. So in ASP.NET Code, we have the www root folder added, and it is treated as a web root folder. All your static files can be stored in any folder under the web root and can be accessed with a relative path to that folder. Let me just open this containing folder.
Can I have a quick one question? So the launch setting or app setting will be replacing the web config, is it?
Uh, Sorry, I could not get your question.
Uh, Normally for the .NET framework, we will have the web config file. So for
Yes,
.NET Core, we were not using the web config, is it?
yes, here there is no web config. Yes,
Okay, thanks. So we will for the port and IIS settings, then it will be set up in the launch setting. So the app setting
yes,
will be in app setting.json, right?
yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I just open it into the my folder structure, and here you see this is their WWCode root folder which I was talking about. All my statics here we have JS, CSS, JS libraries, and everything. So this is where here you can store all your static files or whatever is written here. So in general, in our standard ASP.NET application, we generally used to have folders created here itself. That I created a different folder for CSS, for script, for JSS. But now in Core, they have created a by default folder, a root folder, and they have created the by default CSS JS pages here, and you can just add it into this. There are three separate folders. If I see JS, there is already a JavaScript added for my application this way. You can access static files with the base URL and file name. So for example, I want to I want to open my CSS right now. So we had that local host. I can just directly type in there after my port CSS app.css. I don't need to access www root. What I'm trying to say is this. Let me show you. We run it again. I have a CSS page here, right? Site.css. And here comes my local host. Now, if I just add CSS site.css, I can directly see my site. The CSS page has been opened here. I did not have to write www root then css.site. I can directly just add CSS and site. So this is how we can directly access static files with the base URL. This was my base URL, localhost 64176. This is my port, and this I just could access it directly. So I do not need to mention the root folder. We can rename the root folder to any other folder, but we need to set it as a web root. So for example, I rename it to any folder. So let's go to our tutorial to see how we can rename and then use it. We just close this one. So here you see if I just go and rename my www root folder to any folder, I can just write in my main method this web host builder. And in that web host builder, there is one functionality called use web root. And I have to mention in that my now root folder is called as content. So this is something that generally we do not do. It is not a common practice, but this is just to give you an idea that you can modify this. It is not something that you cannot play with this folder. You can obviously play with this folder, but in order for it to work as expected, you need to mention it here in your use web rules functionality. Let's see what program.cs is for us. So this current one is following 2.0. I have run the 3.0. Okay. So doesn't matter if say it is the same thing of setting up host. ASP.NET Core Web Application is actually a console project which starts executing from the entry point. That is the main program. This is common whenever we used to work with console application. Whoever has worked here with C#, they know the first thing is your main function. So here you see we already have a main function create host builder, which is basically configuring your startup and this everything. So we can now go and add a program into this web builder. So my they have added a build. This was we already have this instead of build web host. In R it is saying configure web host. It is just because of the difference of the framework we used. As you see, the main function method calls expression build web host to build web host with pre-configured defaults. The build web host expression can also be written as a method that returns this. So it is nothing. It is a static function which is returning you the default builder application and telling us what to use as a startup and build. Let's understand the hosting steps. This is the main part we need to understand. The web host, this web host is a static class which can be used for creating an instance of iWebhost and iWebhost. So these are our two interfaces which are having pre-configured defaults. That is the create default builder. It configures Kestrel, IS integration and other configurations. So what this is what our create default builder function actually does. It is going to use Kestrel. It is defining what to use as the content root folder. Then it is defining this family. So the what you are asking about how to we are defining the files. Here we are adding that we have to add this JSON file and what is my develop environment. See, depending upon the environment variable that it was already added, it is adding here. So this is what internally it's doing. We don't need to do all of this because as soon as I added the application, this work has already been done for me. But this portion is just to explain you that how it is being there. If I change the environment, let's say I want to add something for a new environment, QA environment or UAT environment. In my properties window, I could go there and in my properties window, I can add a new environment variable and then I can configure it for that. Here I can add another environment variable for let's say UAT environment, and then I can go there and configure it for UAT as well. Okay. Here we read about Kestrel. Here also I said it configures Kestrel. So first question is this is new. There was nothing known as Kestrel in ASP.NET. This is new to me. What is Kestrel? Kestrel is an open source cross-platform web server for ASP.NET Core. So here it does not use directly on IIS. It uses Kestrel for your web serving hosting thing. It is designed to use behind proxy because it has not yet matured to be exposed as a complete. So it does use right now Kestrel, but it is not a complete web server. So a very basic question comes with us, and it is generally a question that if you go and attempt a very simple basic test of ASP.NET Core, they do ask you what is the web server used for ASP.NET Core, and generally people select IAS. But IAS is not the web server for ASP.NET Core; it is Kestrel. Let's move about startup.cs. Let's first see our startup.cs file. This is my startup.cs file. Here you can see the configuration, then we are adding the razor pages using the routing and everything. Let's now read about it. What does this mean? Today, we are not doing much of the coding. It's more of the theoretical area because we want to understand when I added, what was added, what is already happening. So we are just trying to understand the basics of this. includes startup clause. It is like global.exact. So anyone who has worked in .NET framework, they know there is a file added as global.exact file. This startup file is exactly the same work of global.exact used to do here. It is executed first when the application starts. So whenever you run the application, whenever I click Control plus F5, this startup file is the first file to run. It can be configured using use startup method at the time of configuring at the host. But in my host file use startup, I can configure with startup file if I want to change. I can just change the startup class as well. The name startup is by ASP.NET Core convention. However, we can be given any name to the startup class. As we said earlier, like we can change the name of the WW root. We can also change the name of this same startup class also. But again, we will need to define it. So here you see in the startup.cs, this is the register dependent types with IOC container here, and what are the configuration services we will be adding. Here, same again is development area and everything I told you we add here. So there are two public methods, configure services and configure. It's important to know what is the difference between configure services and configure. And just to make sure, in any startup class, configure method is must to have, but configure service is optional. So configure service, the dependency injection pattern is used heavily in ASP.NET Core architecture, and it is built on IOC containers. It is a place where you register your dependent classes with the built-in IOC list. So what is the use of configure service is if I have some dependent classes. What I mean by dependent classes is, let's suppose I need to perform a function for which I added a naked package. I installed a predefined library for me. So I need to register it. I need to register that my this particular class is dependent on X class for certain functionality. And where I'll define it into the configure services method. You just need to include it into the parameter of the constructor. ASP.NET Core refers dependent class as a service. So it's like consuming a service. So whenever you read service, then understand it as a class which is going to be used in some other class. So generally we say now we are consuming service. There is integration done. I have added an integration into my application to work with PayPal. What does the service mean? It's basically consuming data from there. So it's something nothing but a class talking to another class, and both the classes are dependent on each other. So these type of configurations are defined into configure services section. Next come configure. The configure method is a place where you can configure application request pipeline. ASP.NET Core introduced the middleware components to define a request pipeline, which will be executed on every request. So you include only those middleware components which are required. This is how when I told in the beginning that ASP.NET Core is faster, it's better in performance. It is because it only will include application of components which are required by the application and go and discard the others. You don't have to use every other thing. So here, when I say use this using the async application, it is just typing the hello world. It is configuring for your development environment. If I have 4 environments for this, the configure will only work according to the environment variable set as it used to be done only for development. It will only work for development and it won't process for other environments, thus saving a lot of memory and time. The configure method includes 3 parameters. That first is iApplication builder object, iHosting, and then is iLogger by default, which is we are not seeing here. At runtime, the configure services method is called by before the configure method. So configure service is called first, and then we call configure. This is so that you can register your custom service with the IC container, which may use in the configure method. So I may want to first tell about my dependencies, and then when my dependencies are clear, using the same application builder environment, and I can finally configure all those dependencies. So if you're talking the layman term language, what these two are simply doing is, first configure service is telling me that, hey, I'm dependent on these 3 things. And then I'm asking configure to configure all my dependencies. I I may not have any dependencies. That's why configure services is optional. Like right now, my application, I do not have any dependency. So this is completely open. I, it's just adding some razor pages and nothing more. I do not want to depend on any external service or any other service. So I may have removed this. I might but configure it. It will use to configure all HTTP request pipelines. Any question here, guys?
Uh, One question is Razor page is better or Angular is better? Or in which situation we
Mhm.
should use which one? Because there, I think there is a lot. Then I'm pretty confused on it.
Okay. So when initially when we discussed of ASP.NET versus ASP.NET Core, there it was said to us that here in ASP.NET Core, razors are the we say what's the correct word to use here? Uh, Suggested preferred way of working. The one I use is a web application template. I did not go for MVC. Generally, Razor comes with the MVC thing. But here in ASP.NET Core, since we do not have web forms, here we work with Razor pages.
Thanks. Is there
Okay,
any
so mhm.
GUI designer or the like can drag and drop and see the whole design tools that I can use to see the interface without debugging it or running
Yes, we
it?
will be having toolbox here. We have not right started designing any application pages and all. So we will be going to have toolbox, and of course I can go and add a form here, a new and design the pages. I can add my controls over here. We will be getting into this.
Okay,
In the next session, we will be starting by designing some page where I'll be adding text box, I'll be adding content, and we will be doing that. Of
okay,
course, we will be doing it there.
thanks. But for Angular, do we have, sorry, just a quick,
Sorry, I did not get your question.
because for if I using Angular, do I have something like GUI designer or something to see the design?
Uh, and same, it's going to work exactly how you used to work with ASP.NET or Angular. You will be having the design phase as well.
Oh, okay. I will try
You
it
will
out.
you can drag and drop controls here. Yes.
Thank you. I will try it out. Yeah, thanks.
So we have only 5 minutes left for the session, so we'll just quickly do this command line interface, and in our next section will start with the dependency injection. So we have, as we can directly do that, use directly from here the CLI also. Generally, some people are comfortable with CLI, some people are not. So depending upon how comfortable you are with this, you can use directly for creating or restoring packages and everything. You can open CLI, it gets installed directly when you install the .NET Core, and it will you can use the command structure. You can simply say so. The first it comes with .NET. When you open a CLI, it will directly come as .NET, and here then you can use add new. So I can instead of I use the UI, I go went with create new project, and I selected here. Instead of going through UI, I can also use the command line prompt, and here I can use create new project, restore a build. Instead of doing Control plus F5 or F5 to build my application, I can also build my application using command prompt. Some people are very much interested or doing they like doing things using command prompt. So for them it is, or especially the Linux where the people who are working on Linux servers and all, they are very much familiar and they enjoy working on that screen. But I'm a more of a UI person, so I like doing it through UI. So it depends upon if you want to do this, you can go and check all. They are pretty basic, same package. functionalities, and you can read through here that whatever commands, and you can directly add and work with your application, build your application through command line interface as well. It's pretty basic. By default, this will come. You just need to add, like I want to add a package. I'll just set add package this, and it will add the package into my application. So with this, I'm wrapping up our session here. We have 2-3 minutes left, and we can take the and stop presenting, and let's take any queries. Definitely would like to add on to something. That's great. So in our next session, the objective is to learn of dependency injection and middleware. We I very openly talked about environment variable middleware and everything. We read the words today, but we don't know what they are doing. How I can add a custom middleware, how I can add a new environment variable, how I'll serve the static files. So all of these things we will be seeing in our next class on how we can do this, how I can install static files, middleware, and everything. These all things. You all have the link to the tutorial I was referring to. I'll share it again. So if you want, you all can revise what I discussed with you guys. I can also share the PPT. Let's give it to Daphne. She can send it to you guys if you want that. And yes, definitely already shared the tutorial link. We also have a WhatsApp study group where we discuss all of this. So you please feel free to join that. Uh, we are generally all from Asia only right now, and please feel free to share it with other friends of yours if they are interested to join. The more the merrier. Also, anyone here who already has knowledge of ASP.NET Core and would like to volunteer, like I'm also learning. I'm not an expert on ASP.NET Core. I'm as beginner as you. I've worked on .NET framework, but I've not worked on .NET Core actually. So I'm also learning. Our whole agenda from this program is teach and learn. So last session definitely initiated and she took. This session I took. Maybe next session any one of you can take. Please feel free to volunteer. We are all following the same tutorial, or you can follow another tutorial and come up with just that we need to just prepare a little before, and we'll be happy to learn from others as well. This is an open forum. Anyone here can volunteer. It was great having you guys today. Thanks, Jeffrey. See you all next
See you.
Yeah, see you. Bye bye.
See you. Bye bye.
week. Bye bye.
Bye.